and welcome to the Philistine podcast, where we are challenged with trying to articulate the love for art and storytelling. Today I am joined by my time-traveling friend, Lucy.
Hello, everyone.
I'm glad everybody could join us today. Thank you very much for being here. Because today we will be discussing the prophet, Richard Kelly's 2001 film, Donnie Darko. And I'm very excited to talk about this film with you. I've always thought it was very strange, and today I find it even stranger. It's like if you took Gilbert Grape and mashed it with Under the Silver Lake. There's a lot of interesting conversations you can have around Donnie Darko, I think. I think it's the canonical film for what a cult classic film is. It's got this weird faux-Lynchian kind of vibe, with its characters knowing more than they lead on without maybe actually even knowing what they know. There's a lot I like about Donnie Darko, and I'm not going to pretend like I know all of the fan theories out there or even care, because I know there's the directorial cut of the film that is maybe slightly a little bit more clear in what the film's trying to say. I, of course, believe that's kind of a coward's move in being a storyteller or artist. But I love the strange beat-to-beat of Donnie more or less figuring out what's happening to him. He very much reminds me of a young conspiracy theorist who is starting to unlock some of these secrets about his world, about the universe. His teachers and maybe his mom very much feel like something out of Silver Lake, where they're giving us a small glimpse kind of behind the curtain without, like I said earlier, maybe realizing what they're doing, like they're unknowing kind of puppets working for something larger than themselves. This film provides probably one of the very few examples of time travel that I like, if you want to call it that. There's even this strange fourth wall breaking element at the very end of the film, when the mom and those two kids are waving. It's so strange, and I'm not exactly sure how I really feel about the film, but it lives with you. It consumes some people. But I'm very curious what you think of Donnie Darko, and will it become one of your anthem movies?
Yeah, I'm super excited to talk about this movie with you, because this was a hard watch for me. I didn't understand this movie the first time I watched it, and I still don't understand this movie now. I was hoping that after avidly growing my film watching skills, my critiquing muscles, for about the past 2 years, I was ready for a film like this. My Shinigami eyes are stronger, but man, was I wrong. And I'm hoping we have a good conversation here today and I get some clarity either on why it's secretly a good movie, or some clarity on why I am right and this movie's not that great. This movie is a big ball of frustration. It begs for an analysis, it begs to say something, but it's not earned. It's an artsy-fartsy film, and I'm probably not going to be kind to this movie, and I hope you keep me accountable and respectful, because this is someone's baby. And like you said, it is a cult classic, meaning lots of folks out there are passionate about this film for some reason. On surface level, sure, I get it. A teenage boy who has some obvious issues, and per his therapist, might be schizophrenic, sees a bunny named Frank who tells him there's a ticking time bomb and the world will end in 28 days. There's teenage angst written all over this movie, which I'm not mad at, but turning it into a sci-fi kind of film? What does time travel have anything to do with me relating to Donnie and his issues? I did enjoy the element of him grappling with loneliness. His parents don't understand him, his teachers are clueless, except for the ones who actually care, but then they get fired or can't totally connect with their students, right? There are certain topics and things you can't discuss with a teacher, and it's weird to meet your teacher outside of school hours to discuss something. At least, to parents, it's weird. because we've completely gotten away with a mentorship type of life. I like that you bring up Gilbert Grape because I do enjoy the hypocrisy and falseness of the suburban life with his parents and several of the other teachers, the PTA meetings, the motivational speakers, and above all, Kitty and her sparkle motion. But what does that have to do with Donnie dying, or did die then not died, or travel back in time? And what's this big focus with Jim Cunningham and his weird cult tapes that are played in class just to show us he's a pedophile? I don't know. I like Donnie's speech about emotions being more complex than fear and love. But so what? Donnie, do you have any emotions besides maniacally laughing and being rude? Seeing the bunny man confused me, and I guess it's sort of explained in the end that he's wearing a bunny costume because it was Halloween, not for the sake of just creeping me out. And it haunts Donnie because he is the one who shot him. So it's this sort of manifestation of Donnie's guilt. But to what end? Why? And why is Donnie okay with dying in the end? There's just so many questions for me here. And you're right, there's fan theories and lots of source material. I mean, there's the director's commentary. Apparently, there were DVDs out there with excerpts from the storyboard, a 52-minute production of the diary, text from the in-universe book, The Philosophy of Time Travel. I mean, there's a lot, and it sounds like a very interactive film. But are you admitting that this film is so confusing that it requires all this extra stuff to explain? Shouldn't your film at least stand alone? Your cult classic status cannot be that a film is confusing. We have lots of characters and quite a cast. Jake Gyllenhaal and his sister Maggie, Patrick Swayze, Drew Barrymore, even Seth Rogen. And just when you didn't know who else was about to pop on screen, we see Ashley Tisdale, Jerry Traynor, and that kid from Zoe 101. Which is fine. We had some great performances in here. Of course, Jake Gyllenhaal killed it. The rest of the cast was pretty good. I'm not mad at the performances whatsoever. But what about the characters? Is Donnie too dark? Was he likable? I think he's only likable because he's cute. He's a young, all dark, emo kid. And of course, I'm not the only one who thinks so, since Gretchen sits next to the cutest boy in class, right? I don't know about the rest of the characters. Gretchen was okay. The parents and his sisters were okay. His friends were okay. But then we have Grandma Death. I'm not sure what she was doing, who she's supposed to represent, what she's supposed to represent. I know she writes the book, but so what? Please explain that to me. Or better yet, how about Sharita Chen? She's obviously important here, to some degree, but I don't know why. The dialogue and soundtrack are probably the best things about this film. The cover of Mad World, oh my god, I would say icing on the cake, but there's no cake here. But that dialogue is definitely a standout. It's clever, very conversational, very emotionally loaded, and simplistic at the same time. Of course, there were sections of the dialogue and conversations that went over my head, especially with the science teacher when explaining about the timelines and the wormholes in the book. But I guess all I needed to know out of that was that there was time travel and wormholes. Or maybe this was the crux of the film that I needed to understand the rest of the film. I don't know. The film was way too surreal for me. There was no consistency in tone, because why were there horror elements, but still a high school movie, but a suburban satire, but a tragedy, but a sci-fi, maybe an allegory? Man, pick your lane. And of course, there are a few exceptions to films that wonderfully mesh genres, but this wasn't it for me. This was too much.
All right, there's a lot to unpack there. And I guess to just address the elephant in the room, the abundance of extra materials out there for this film, excluding fan theories, but just the commentary and the publicized excerpts of the book, the director's cut and whatnot, the so-called definitive points Richard Kelly himself has brought up, are, like I said, a coward's way of justifying one thing or another. And it may not have been just Richard Kelly. I'm sure producers were like, we need to explain this. This movie didn't make any money, so we need to make up for lost time. It very much reminds me of a Coen Brothers early film where people think there's much more going on, and that may be true, but when you start explaining in the way that the director's cut does, you really start to backtrack on the initial release of something, and that obviously creates quite the conversation at the very least. Problems, I would say. You start to reduce any intent you may have had to begin with. And I've said it many times before, but when the artwork is released, the artist is dead. Because even that same artwork, re-perceived by the artist some time down the line, it changes. And the so-called meaning of the piece cannot change along with it. So, what's really great about Donnie Darko is this merge of the conspiratorial mindset mixed with someone who is deeply mentally unwell. And the time travel element, this time loop thing that is going on, is no other than this representation of this stuckness, this alienation that Donnie is bringing onto himself. And as we know, people who are deeply depressed are very unlikely to kill themselves. But when they swing in and out of it, those are hot moments of unaliving yourself.
That's funny you say that, because that was my first thought, that it was just a giant metaphor.
Well, I think that is mostly clear. I want to say obvious, but maybe not quite. And I know these director cuts and additional pieces involve the presence of aliens. And I read some of these things over the years and have always thought, in what world does a movie this surrealistic and strange imply something is literal? You know?
Yes.
There's no reality happening here. There isn't a movie more allegorical or metaphorical. Nothing here is as it seems.
Yeah. We love to talk about unreliable characters, right? How unreliable is Donnie Darko?
The movie. Not just the character. How unreliable is the movie Donnie Darko?
Well, it's through his eyes.
That's a good point. So obviously the movie in its entirety.
Yes. And maybe I do need to think about this movie without all that extra stuff. Not that I looked at any of it or read any of it, but just the existence of it made me feel like I was missing something. Because I'm all for an in-universe book explanation. And this time travel element with Grandma Death is what confused me to not follow through on the giant metaphor here.
Yeah, I think it's important to, of course, there may be many ways to read into this film, but to realize that the time loop is a time loop in the sense that every day feels the same. Nothing's changing. Life is moving on without you.
And I'll add that one of the things that kept the time traveling as a metaphor thing from working for me was this idea that Gretchen and Donnie never even knew each other, right? At the end, she tells that kid, oh, I didn't know him, or whatever she says, where you say we have this weird wall break. That wouldn't explain anything for me, except that maybe Donnie was crazy. And he's pretty smart, right? He has these moments where he says something really clever or his teachers admire him. So I don't want him to be as quite as an unreliable character as he is. It's his mental stability that's not reliable, not every conversation he has with somebody. So I don't know. I'm having a hard time making everything make sense, flow. If I have one idea of what this movie could represent, it gets broken by something else.
And like we've said before, breaking that allegory isn't necessarily an end to the potential meaning. Maybe there's something so extreme here that it kind of completely derails you in thinking, well, I must be completely off base.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're right, Gretchen not knowing who he is because the time loop reset does kind of ground the film to a point of, well, maybe all of that did just happen.
Right.
And to be honest, I'm not sure what the fourth wall breaking is about. It almost, I think, gives you chills when it happens because it's so jarring.
Yeah, I took that as the suburban life satirical moment where when something happens in the neighborhood, you hear a siren, you hear a noise, everyone's peeping through their windows, everyone comes out to see what happened. I mean, I have gone out in my PJs plenty of times to see what was going on outside. And just, like you said, something eerie happening in life, but you're still humans, you're still neighbors, so you kind of have to acknowledge each other. But your kid just died.
But we, the audience, are tourists in this world, and they're waving at us.
Yeah, that's how I'm interpreting the end. I don't believe that was a fourth wall break, unless it obviously was and I just missed it, because they were waving at the mom, not at me. Maybe if they wouldn't have shown the mom way back, I could have seen that as more of a fourth wall break.
That's fair. That may have been just a bad camera angle, but the film is so unreliable that it's hard to not try to get something out of that, I guess. Kind of involving that scene and other scenes before with Donnie's mom. She's definitely one of the central characters that makes me think that she knows more about what's going on than she's letting on. And to the conspiratorial point, at least from the skewed perspective we have, it looks like she expected Donnie to kill himself. Kind of like how the two teachers led him to killing himself, or at least how he was perceiving their messaging.
Well, they knew their kid was disturbed. They spoke to Dr. Thurman, and that's when we found out that Donnie is schizophrenic. And there's a line earlier in the film where the dad essentially says that his son reminds him of that weird kid in school. So there's some acknowledgement there that their son's weird. And I guess that's how I took the mom's presence in all of this. Keeping Gilbert Grape here as the parallel, it reminds me of Betty, the woman Gilbert was having an affair with, and how her husband unalived himself. And she didn't really flinch. She didn't really bat an eye. It was just expected. She had a feeling that that was going to happen. Again, this timeline idea here is throwing me in for a loop because you could also say that she knew what was going to happen because she was in the plane and it crashed. So maybe that's why she also felt something. Just like at the end, how Frank touched his eye, like he had been shot in another timeline, in another dimension. And I don't like it. I don't like this two interpretations here. Or too many interpretations here.
Yeah, the potential of any metaphor is challenged with these extreme ideas, such as people dying or losing a child, or even extreme concepts like cults and time travel.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say, to the time travel point, I love Drew Barrymore's performance because of her, in general, monotonous delivery. Through the eyes of Donnie, he's receiving this spiel from her in this monotone voice, almost like he's interpreting it as she's this robot, basically, that does this day in, day out, in a very conspiratorial sense. Like she's literally a robot, like she turns off when Donnie leaves the room type thing.
Yeah, that's not exactly the characterization I got from her. I got more of a chill vibe and do whatever you want kind of vibe, to polarize her with Kitty, the other teacher who's kind of crazy and is the opposite teacher that Drew Barrymore's character is. And surprising enough, several of the sections with each of these teachers were some of my favorite parts of the film, and I almost wish I didn't get a lot of Donnie and his issues. I wish we would have focused more on the suburbanness of this film. There was one scene in the gym, I think it was a PTA meeting, where I think they were discussing the students and how one of them burst open the pipes and flooded the school, and Kitty starts talking about banning books. Which, by the way, there were quite a few books seen throughout this film that I liked. I wish I could have focused on who was reading what. But then Kitty has this big speech about how she's a teacher and she's the parent of a middle-sex child, and she's the only one who can bridge the connection between teachers and students, and she just sounds insane. And Kitty is insane, and how she's in love with Jim Cunningham and all his ideologies. That to me was way more interesting than Donnie's issues and his visions or dreams or whatever you want to call them of Frank. Even his love story with Gretchen was not as interesting as any of the discussions that happened with the adults in the film. I almost didn't care that Gretchen died.
Yeah, the presence of books is another obvious telltale of something bigger at play.
Mm-hmm.
Some literary device, right?
Yep.
It's meant to be ironic. Maybe it is a Coen Brothers-esque situation, not unlike the reason for creating a serious man, just to make fun of your audience. And so maybe Richard Kelly on some level retroactively is representing his most hardcore audience that love him and his work. He's representing them through Kitty, which I love Kitty and her obsession with Jim and this
commitment to motion sparkles.
Yeah, and warped perspective of love and fear being any different from one another.
Mm-hmm.
I wish we could have gotten more out of Patrick Swayze. He's excellent. But again, it brings me back just to this point of this very alienated perspective that we have with Donnie and fellow struggling teenagers and how they think certain things are crazy, like impossibly crazy, like Jim Cunningham's operation. And Donnie finding the Kitty stuff only kind of elevates that thought of the stories students, young people fabricate around teachers and other people. Because there's also this kind of nice tie-in of fear and love, which should definitely incite the idea of God, only kind of furthering Donnie's soon-to-be-discovered destiny that he is supposed to kill himself.
Where is that in the film?
I get it. I get your... And my doubts and skepticism of the film kind of go to the place of, well, it's suggested, but is it actually tied to any valid point of perspective? And because the movie is so unreliable, because Donnie is so unreliable that it somehow writes itself out of corners. It justifies all the weird, or at least most of it in my mind. But I am struggling of making complete sense of it. But that to me only further justifies the kind of conspiratorial perspective of the universe telling Donnie what he must do. There's like this unspoken path you're supposed to take, or unspoken thing that more people know about than are letting on.
And if we didn't explain Frank away, I might be on board with that.
Frank throws a wrench at me, no doubt, because it's similar to Gretchen, where it starts to ground the film in the sense that it is real life. But then again, I think it's supposed to be along the lines of a déjà vu type situation. That only further Donnie's making the right decisions. That he knows he's on the right path. The time noodles being basically described by the teacher connecting Donnie to Grandma Death, the literature teacher also connecting Donnie to Grandma Death with a cellar door. And maybe Gretchen just represents that kind of perpetual new girl, new kid on the block. The demonic rabbit represents a déjà vu, and Gretchen represents the new kid. The new kid's very at home in the suburban life. Déjà vu's very confusing.
Yeah, but Gretchen has this weird backstory that is, well, I said it, weird. Her mom got stabbed by her dad, and she had to change her name, so Gretchen's not even her real name. Did Donnie make this up?
We had a girl at high school who claimed she was raised by wolves for a few years, and she swore by it. Obviously, she was lying, but she probably got some mileage if she was telling people that in elementary school. A high schooler explaining why her parents are divorced because of crazy reasons. I mean, I might buy it.
Yeah, but then at the end, she comes running and saying, "My mom's gone. I think my dad got her. Or did she just want to get laid? Hold me, Donnie."
I think Gretchen's mom unalived herself, and she explains that away because of the lie that she's already put into motion.
Yes, okay, but if Donnie is already an unreliable character, I can't have any of the other characters lying, being unreliable. But I guess you can explain that away with, well, this is through Donnie's perspective, so take it as you will.
Nobody's as they seem.
At least when we have Donnie in the picture, right? Moments in the PTA meeting, or when the parents are alone in the hotel room, shouldn't be unreliable. Those should be the most raw, or at least truthful moments that we get.
And there's something to that, because I've always taken the literature teacher, Drew Barrymore's character, when she says it's meant to be ironic, I dare say that's another fourth wall break.
Yeah, maybe Richard's too clever for his own good. Maybe Richard's too ironic. Who is Sharita Chen, and what does she have to represent in this film? She's in here quite a bit. She's always running away, saying sorry, saying shut up. And we have two pivotal moments with her in the film. One where she does her performance and she's an angel. I think she was singing or lip syncing, I don't know. But she had this performance while Donnie was catching Jim Cunningham's place on fire. And then we have another moment later on in the film where her and Donnie bump into each other and she drops a book and earmuffs. The book has Donnie written on it, maybe some hearts around it. That's how I took it. Like she had a crush on him thing. And then Donnie takes the earmuffs. And then he tells her something, I'm not sure what he says, but a positive sort of message. And then he puts the earmuffs on and keeps walking. What?
Sharita's pretty essential to the film. She is Donnie's guardian angel. And this becomes, I think, evident when he is burning down Jim's place, because he's supposed to be at the school concert or whatever talent show. He should be participating in things like that. Watching Sharita do her angel thing.
Yeah, and I guess his family was there to watch his little sister perform.
Yet he's burning Jim's place to the ground, which he uncovers some heinous stuff, of course, but what's happening here is Sharita's losing him. He's on the path to killing himself, as you would already know by the end of the film.
You can't just plop wings on somebody and call them a guardian angel. The first half of the film, she spends running away from him. And then now we're going to pretend she was actually meaningful this whole time? She was looking out for Donnie? When? Where?
I sound a lot like a lot of the fandom around this film, probably. I don't like this movie that much, I promise. She's like a good dream. When you think harder and harder about it, you can remember less and less. It's fleeting.
I guess not all guardian angels are guarding?
Well, your guardian angel can't intervene, I don't think.
She definitely didn't intervene.
She does in one little way when she says shut up. And she says it a lot. Like 3 or 4 times probably.
It's true.
Most of her dialogue might be shut up. Is it a stretch to say that that is another, maybe not quite fourth wall, but a intended message for Donnie to shut up or to not listen to the people who are trying to guide him in one direction, like his 2 teachers? Because they're very charming, Drew Barrymore and the science teacher, and they're definitely at the core of him taking the actions he takes to his unaliving of himself.
Yes, that's as much of a stretch as a lot of the points made here. This movie was definitely too much, too clever, without any cohesion, any consistency. I don't like that this extra source to explain the movie away exists. I honestly had to pause the movie about an hour in, not because it was boring or any pacing issues, but just how exhausting it was to watch, from my brain just not clicking to anything, not grasping at anything. Because there are bits and pieces here that I like, but when you can't pick one thing and stick to it, right? That's something we really appreciate about some movies. The tightness, the constraint. I don't know if I could watch this movie again.
Well, all right, man. Thank you very much for watching this movie and talking about it here today.
You are very welcome.
Do you have a budget guess?
I'm going 15 mil. The film didn't look fantastic. The visuals didn't stand out for me particularly. We do have a lot of people, a lot of interactions, a lot of sets. So I'm not sure about that. I did get more horror vibes than anything, but that's probably because the bunny costume really freaked me out. And I will admit, there was a slight jump scare for me. I think it was when the plane engine thingy fell from the sky and everything shook. I was not expecting that, and I did jump a little bit, but that's not the movie's intent. That was just me.
That's what it sounds like when a child blows their head off with a shotgun.
Oh. The movie was almost 2 hours, but not quite. So I'm not completely confident about my 15 mil, but this also wasn't a super high production, like Dune or something, I don't know. So, I don't know. I'm still guessing 15.
Well, it says here that it was 4.5 million.
Oh, even lower.
And it went on to make 7.5 million.
Oh, it didn't even make my guess.
And over on Letterboxd with 2.35 million people.
I can't wait to hear this.
They all weighed in at a 4.0. It's a little surprising how high it is, especially based on, I guess, the rest of Richard Kelly's track record. He's pretty controversial, but this is the hill everyone's ready to die on for some reason.
Why is this so highly rated if it didn't do great at the box office in 2001?
Yeah, that's why I said it's a canonical example of a cult classic. Because some people call cult classic films cult classic, even though they do really well in the box office or even in ratings. Just because it's not a Star Wars level fandom doesn't mean it's a cult classic. A movie that probably didn't make any money when it first came out, and then later picking up steam many years after, that's a cult classic. Like, something can't be an instant cult classic. That's not how it works.
Gotcha. I don't know about my score. My initial thought was 1.5, but then I thought about how I gave Anora a 2. So then I thought about, do I like this movie more than I liked Anora? And then I got completely lost and derailed. So maybe I'm bumping it up into a 2. I like a lot of what you have to say. I'm glad we fall in line on some of the things we liked about it. But this still doesn't explain the movie to me. I still didn't get anything out of the movie. I didn't get anything out of Anora either, but that's a whole nother episode that you can check out. So I don't know. I like the dialogue quite a bit. And again, some of the adultier interactions were pretty great. And I really don't want to experience this a third time to know how I really feel about it.
Well, Christopher Nolan says you're supposed to watch a movie over and over again.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Maybe I'll watch it again in 5 years when, I've had 5 years of movie watching and critiquing, analyzing, whatever under my belt. And I'll either appreciate it a lot more or not. I don't know. I really don't know. I almost went scoreless with this film, but I think I'm sticking in the 1.5 to 2 range.
That's fair. There's some charm here, no doubt. The performances are fun. The writing at times is awesome.
Yeah, Jake Gyllenhaal killed it.
There's a lot going on in Donnie Darko, especially at face value. It's really hard to digest even when you've picked a side. And it's funny because I think a lot of these ideas, these themes are kind of at home with one another. Like this suburban life, expectation, alienation, conspiracies, depression. They all seem ripe for a teenage mind, in my mind.
That's a good point.
But you have to identify them too. That at face value, this film doesn't, I don't think, offer a lot. That's one reason I'm very at odds with the walking back with the director's cut and all of these accoutrements of additional things.
Mm-hmm.
It, A, shows a lack of confidence in what you've put out, what you've delivered, and B, shows a lack of confidence in what you expect of your audience. And I will add, I can't say too much on it, but the soundtrack is awesome. Would probably be in my top 10 of soundtracks for movies.
Yeah.
I don't love soundtracks where we take existing music and put it in a film. It's always been a little weird, but occasionally it's really pulled off. Of course, Shrek, right?
I was about to say, Shrek? And Shrek 2?
It's kind of reminds me of voice acting in some way, where if you don't design a character around the voice, it's a little bit of a problem, and especially when that voice is super recognizable.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like, it's distracting, and maybe that's a me problem. And scoring this film is very difficult. There's a lot going on. This film lives with me forever and ever. I think about it once every 6 months, probably, in some fashion. I'm not a diehard. I am not going up to bat for Donnie Darko after this. But I like a lot about it. So I'm somewhere between a 3 and a 2.5. And every time I'm thinking, yeah, it's a solid 3, kind of like when I'm watching the movie, I'm like, maybe I don't understand this movie. And so I walk it back to a 2.5. So I don't know. It's an essential movie to watch, I think, if you value the artistry of filmmaking.
Yeah, this is a widely talked about movie and referenced everywhere. So in that sense, yes, it's a watch. If you want to be cultured of any kind, you need to watch this movie.
Yeah, and it's I would say, canonical example of what a film can look like. Not aesthetically, I don't think it's a very pretty film. Like you kind of mentioned earlier, it's kind of ugly at times, and I know that's probably just a product of the late 90s, early 2000s.
Agreed.
Films were very ugly back then, but it's got so much gas in the tank that it's either this beautiful bonfire or this really crazy car wreck. It's a strange movie. But yeah, man, thank you very much for talking about this movie with me here today, and thank you guys for listening to this episode of the Filmistines. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Remember, we post every Monday with an abridged episode that's typically shorter than core episodes, where we race home from the theater and give you some fresh, unfiltered, raw thoughts. And every other Wednesday and Friday on patreon.com and Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube for our free episodes. Our next episode will be on the Robert Zemeckis film, Castaway.
Yeah, Zemeckis.
So please look forward to that. That'll be a good talk. I've never seen Castaway. Remember to leave nice comments, thoughts, and ideas on our Patreon as well. Come subscribe, come request a movie. We appreciate all the support. Thank you guys very much. But until next time, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Filmistines. Thanks for tuning in and joining us on our cinematic journey. We hope you enjoyed the discussion and gained some new insights and perspectives on the world of movies. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform, especially Patreon at patreon.com/Filmistines. And follow us on social media for more film-related content. We love hearing from our listeners, so if you have any feedback, suggestions of movie recommendations, or book recommendations, please feel free to reach out to us. Until next time, keep watching and keep loving the magic of movies. This is the Filmistines, signing off.